Hey, you're listening to Sign Criteria, branding for the built environment. I'm John, and before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you and express my gratitude. When I opened up some email this morning, I got a notification from the Good Pods, like podcast app where you can listen to podcasts, and said, "Hey, you've been, congrats, you made the charts." And I looked at the link and followed through, and yeah, so Sign Criteria is now number one on a couple of charts over on Good Pods. That is visual arts and design. So congrats to us, and thank you for making that happen. A couple people I really wanted to shout out to, though, that really helped me help myself, I guess, and that is my son, Jack, over at OKC Decals for all the inspiration. And, of course, Rena over at Megawatts Productions down in Houston, who is the co-host of this show, and she's also my producer, and that means she gathers guests and gets that organized in a way that I can't. Also, I want to thank our first guest. You know, it's hard to be the first at anything, but we had some bold folks show up. So David Martino, thank you. Ted over at Alliance Brands, of course. Heidi Wolf of Wolf Makes Art. And today's guest, Kasey Riley from the Fat Plant Society. Today, we're going to learn about biophilic design, which is effectively like, putting plants on your wall as decorations. I was curious about it and its application to signage and, visual identity and that sort of thing. So let's give that a shot. I appreciate you. Follow along. And also, if you want to be on the show, there's nothing to do but to do it. So just get a hold of us and come on. We'd love to have you. Here's Kasey with the Fat Plant Society.
Biophilic design has actually been around since about if I'm speaking strictly about Western culture, it's been around since about the 15th century, and it might have gone by different names over time, but the very first botanical garden was actually built in Italy, in I want to say the 15th century, and from then on we see biophilic design kind of come and go and come and go. So I'm a child of the 70s, and the 70s, we saw a significant resurgence in biophilic design. We weren't really calling it that. It was, but if you remember people's homes with, they might have beautiful macrame hanging, a macrame plant hanger with, spilling over.
And topiary gardens. Remember, everyone was carving up their shrubs because they went to Disneyland and saw the elephant shape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But biophilic design sort of, with that term in use, becomes prevalent in 2014. There's a company by the name of Terrapin Bright Green and a gentleman by the name of Bill Browning, who is the foremost expert in biophilic design. And what they did was develop a plan, and they call it the 14 patterns of biophilic design. There's actually now a fifth. They updated it in 2024 to include a 15th pattern, and that 15th pattern is awe. But they delineated the benefits of having nature in view, and whether it's and there are a number of different ways to look at it, but biophilic design encompasses nature itself, but then also natural analogs, meaning we might have materials in the home that are wood. So rather than having, plastic furniture and artificially made things, natural analogs include wood furnishings, maybe patterns that have a nature pattern that we know. Yeah. So
that sort of leans towards feng shui a little bit, because they'll accept a replacement for that object.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And Terrapin did a really great job of indicating how we as humans, I think that was the first time anybody had really codified how nature and humans need each other, and how many benefits we experience when we have nature in view.
It's got to be a lot, right? I mean, because we started off just talking loosely about mental health, right? And there's so many studies talking about just spending moments in green, like in trees. Go out and walk amongst the trees for 10 minutes a day. Your whole life changes. And I think, well, without sounding like a hippie, but there's a lot of photonic energy in plant life that it's, we feel it without knowing it. It's that kind of sixth sense, I guess, and our bodies interpret it and feel that. So, man, there's a lot of health benefits that we just can't really prove without sounding like weirdos. But I've looked into it a lot because I'm curious about it, and there's a lot to be said about the design or just being in the presence of nature. I wonder though. So we talk about nature as being natural. How do you think it's different when nature is planned? Because we talked about earlier, we talk about a contrived environment, like a contrived environment for signs where some of the rocks are real and some of them are fake, and some of the stuff is real and some is fake. How do you think that applies to biophilic design where some of it's contrived nature, like, well, we need a fake ficus here because a real one just won't grow here. It's too cold or whatever, versus using the real plant. So it might come down to intention, but is there a difference in natural growth versus intentional planting? I guess is the best way I could ask that.
Well, John, I think you just nailed it in mentioning the experience that we have when we're in nature and that we actually feel it. And not only do we feel it, the plants feel it as well. I just came across a story recently about the fact that my house plants, my plants all around me, know when I enter the room and when I don't. So they hooked up plants to an EKG
Yep,
machine,
for real.
and they were monitoring the plant itself. So not only do I feel different when I'm around plants, plants feel different when we're here. It knows, it picks up on our energy, and it knows. They also know when they're being cared for. And they love that. So there
Hear
is
that,
some
guys?
debate, and I know for cost and primarily it's a maintenance thing for a lot of people to have a fake ficus. And a ficus tree is. Ficuses are notoriously fussy.
Yeah.
You look at them wrong and they'll start dropping
Yeah.
leaves. They're kind of sensitive that way.
Needy.
But there's, I would say that sure, for cost reasons, if you need a fake ficus, that I would say keep it at a minimum.
Right. Yeah.
And employ as much real nature as possible. That's kind of where moss comes in because moss fits into this really bizarre category. For years, I would not refer to our moss as preserved. I realized from a marketing perspective, I was kind of shooting myself in the foot in that regard. But I didn't like the word preserved because that doesn't really address what's happening. What I'm dealing with and what I've got, and all around me and in front of me is moss that has been forced into dormancy. So moss will naturally go into dormancy on its own if it doesn't have the resources it needs. If it's not getting enough light, enough rain, and moss really loves moisture and humidity and rain. That's why places like Washington and Portland and those places have a ton of moss, whereas here in Missouri we don't have as much. We're just too dry. But it's forced into dormancy using a thin layer of paraffin and glycerin, and that essentially just stops the moss in time. And we tell our clients, when I remind them that the moss never needs to be watered and never needs to be misted, when I explain that to them, I tell them that when you mist it or water it, you're going to do one of two things is going to happen. One, you're either going to signal to the moss that it needs to wake up and come out of dormancy, which means it'll start growing again, which we've seen happen in high humidity settings. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's just absolutely fascinating.
Sure.
Folks, sometimes people get nervous. Well, my pillow moss frame is changing. And I'll go out and take a look and say, oh, nope, it's happy. It's more than fine. We either have a really high humidity level or you've watered it, and they'll kind of go, oh, oops. So one of two things will happen. It'll either start growing again, or if it's given some water and it doesn't have the right resources, it'll turn brown on you.
Yeah, because you're washing the coating off. It's trying to grow in an environment it can't grow, and now it's okay.
Exactly. In the early days, when folks first started working with moss, there were people that were calling it zombie moss. And I don't love that term, but I mean, but essentially, yeah, I guess I got to get over the notion of preserved and stop being so specific about what's really going on, because it is preserved. It's been stopped in time. It's hypoallergenic. It doesn't need to be watered or misted. It's going to absorb volatile organic compounds in the air. So that's a good thing. It's a natural antimicrobial. So moss is actually a natural antimicrobial. If you ever find yourself in the forest and you've cut yourself or something and you don't have anything, find some moss. They actually used to
No
use
kidding.
moss to pack wounds in World War
Yeah, you're
One.
right. Yep. I
Yeah.
watched The Revenant.
So yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's
Well, so tell me about that wall behind you. Is that a real moss wall? The
It sure is.
Wow.
So that's a reindeer moss frame behind
Yeah.
me, and that was actually one of the very first pieces we ever created back in 2016. So this piece is 8 years old. It's more than 8 years old now. It is as green today as it was the day we created it.
Yeah, it's wild. That is wild.
Yeah.
So to the
And
listener, I'm looking at a circle of moss, maybe 30 inches or so round on her wall. It looks from this distance like grass is growing out of her wall. It is wild. It is pure green, not a speck of yellow or anything. Really neat.
and in terms of cleaning, because we do get that question, and what about, does it need cleaning? If it ever gets dusty, or if there's a situation where there's a new build and there might be some drywall dust or some, as finishings take place, the easy way to clean it is to simply utilize some compressed air, just like you
Yeah.
use on your
That's
computer.
what I was thinking. Okay, so I'm kind of the opposite. I used to try to convince when I was married, my wife at the time, that I liked when the grass was long. I like things to flourish. It looks more natural. I didn't get why people were always trimming it and making it look so perfect. So, do people actually ask for or request moss walls that are intended to grow and evolve over time?
With us, they don't,
Okay.
because and there is a company, oh my gosh, I want to say the name of the company is Verdure,
Yeah, it's okay.
and Verdure does living
Is
moss
that okay?
walls. Yeah, and so what they've done, which is interesting, it's a whole different situation. They've created a standalone unit that would be about between 6 and 8 feet tall.
Okay.
That would be essentially 6 to 8 feet tall and about 3 feet in width, and it has in its base a recycling
It's just like
water
a giant
system.
waterfall with moss on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Oh,
exactly.
neat. Okay.
We don't see the water, but it's keeping the moss all nice and wet and moist. And
Whoa.
so,
That's
yeah,
like a living
and
fish tank then. I mean, that's
exactly,
work. Okay, that's having a machine
different
working.
ball game.
Yeah, okay. So this is so can you change the colors of the moss or have you been asked to create faces or shapes or logos?
Yes, 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 yes. Two part. I'll get the. We prefer now. Moss can be dyed to any color that you
Of course,
like.
yeah.
So, for example, I will not name the client. The project didn't come to fruition, but we were asked to do a wall that included some magenta, like bright
Like a
pink.
Barbie color.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We were asked to do that, and we tried to steer them away from that because we don't, we want nature to look like nature.
sure. Yeah.
And so we tried to steer them away from that by saying, hey, we can create the wall and then we'll pin mount a beautiful magenta branded sign atop it. And we felt that that would be more aesthetically pleasing. It would just, they ended up deciding to scrap that aspect of the project. But so yes and yes, we prefer to work with green, but moss can be dyed to any color. There's a company over in Italy and that does every color of the rainbow that you can think of. When we do logos or we do any kind of branding, we strongly encourage folks to consider pin mounting, and that could be anything from a beautiful acrylic painted logo to natural wood. Virtually anything that can be pin mounted on top of the moss will work.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So
Okay, so to a listener who doesn't know what pin mounting mean, basically you put thin pins that come through the moss without damaging the moss, and then you mount the flat sign as if it hovers above the moss.
exactly, well put.
Yeah. Some people like
Yeah.
pin. What does that mean? So
Yeah. It'll just float right there. And moss is really, really
yeah,
forgiving. So, we work with some signage companies here locally,
neat.
of
Yep.
course. And Midtown Science is just wonderful. We've done a countless number of projects with them. They get it. They will come in and they will we never need to go back and make any repairs once they've
Yeah.
come. They're so good at what they do. And they're not nervous about the moss. Other signage companies, we'll give them the information and say, don't worry. They get nervous about installing the pin mounts. We'll say, don't worry, moss is incredibly forgiving. You're not going to hurt it. It's not going to die. Everything's okay. And yeah, it's just the logo or whatever, sort of, whether it's a word or even an image, it'll just float nicely on top of it.
Gotcha. Where are some of the more prominent places people usually opt to put, moss? I'll call them moss sculptures or a moss wall. What do you call them?
um Moss walls.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So there's a large sort of overarching term, green walls,
Okay.
and within green walls you've got both living plant walls, which need water and maintenance and fertilizer and all that stuff, and then you've got moss walls as well. And so, yep, moss walls, green walls, we tend to use those interchangeably often. And as I mentioned, we do about 90 or 95% of our work is commercial. We work with a lot of corporations. One of the larger projects we just completed was for the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They've got a new office space and they wanted something impactful in the entryway. And that's what we see more often than not, is folks want something in the entryway that gives people that great green welcome. So when they walk in the door, there's something that's going to hopefully be a little awe-inspiring.
Right.
It's going to make people pause and go, wow, what is that?
Well, so
And
you
yeah,
can't really kill a zombie, so you can't really kill those unless you wash off the coating. And that's really
exactly.
what you're doing, right?
Exactly.
You're washing off the protective coating and you blew it.
Exactly. If and when, so we're in hospitality settings as
Oh,
well.
yeah, I bet.
Here locally, we're in Weston Crown Center here in Kansas
Mm-hmm.
City, and we have a maintenance contract with them. The only reason we have a maintenance contract with them is that they have a lot of moss in their lobby where the bar is also located.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody puts the pieces together. People have a couple of drinks. It's also a very child-friendly hotel. So sometimes, I've actually seen toddlers, beeline at the, speed of light for the moss wall and just grab a chunk right out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
And yeah, yeah. And that's
don't need it.
yeah.
It's so tactile.
That's okay. Because and for us, it'll take just a few minutes to go down and repair it. Oftentimes, the staff there will just pick the piece up and simply replace it because it'll happily go back in.
Yeah.
But I mean, the only maintenance that is required is when damage occurs, and that's usually caused by humans.
Almost always. Yeah. I was thinking because, like, as you can see behind me, we have curtains on the wall and things like that. This is all sound treatment so that our room doesn't echo. And I think, man, a moss wall would be so great in any kind of podcast studio or
Oh my
or
God,
recording
yeah.
studio because that is just grabbing all those high pitched frequencies and sucking them up.
It collects 90% of high voice frequencies and eats them up. So when we think about an office setting, especially it's for somebody who's got maybe in an industrial setting, they've got really high
Yeah.
ceilings and there's that annoying echo, and people are in an open office and they're trying to have phone calls and they can that's where Moss is just a brilliant solution because it's going to capture about 90 it captures 90% of those high voice frequencies, which means it just kind of takes everything and brings it nice, down to a nice, calm,
Yeah.
comfortable volume.
Yeah. It takes the reverb out, it takes kind of the chaos out of the conversation, I guess. What
Exactly.
how is it heavy? Like, because moss itself isn't heavy, but it doesn't seem to be in dirt. And my question is geared toward: could you make it a double-sided panel light enough to hang from a ceiling?
Yes, and I love that question. Yes, and we've done
Oh,
that.
rad!
We developed, and this is a product that is we're revisiting it now, but we developed a product that we call the skinny panel. The skinny panel is 6 inches
Love it.
wide and 46 inches in length. It can be hung vertically or horizontally. It can be placed on a table. Just picture this long
Beautiful.
board. Yeah, and that particular skinny panel weighs less than
Oh
5 pounds.
yeah. So you could just you can put that in a false ceiling then.
You sure
Oh,
could.
that's
And
great.
so with a for an advertising agency, EHE Advertising wanted some moss that was visible. They have a beautiful glass conference room, and they wanted moss visible. So we put the skinny panels back to back so they were double sided,
Hmm.
hung them from the ceiling. And when you walk into there, it's right in their entryway. When you walk in, you see these series of skinny panels. And then when you go into the conference room, you've still got you're not looking at the back of the skinny panel, you're looking at the double side. And because it's so light, it's not draining on the walls. And yeah, so it's we intentionally the frame is really thin and slim, and we work to make sure that the product is still that it's light. So the backers we use, the framing we
Yep.
use,
Yep.
we're trying to ensure that it's not going to be a drain on the wall. And since there's no dirt substrate and no
Right.
watering, you don't have those aspects that would be a drain or a pull.
No, that's so great. One of the things that I think about a lot with nature, I'm always trying to figure out what is it about nature, and I think it's the chaos. You cannot create the chaos in moss, for example. You cannot recreate the chaos in the trees above my house because of the so leaves. They're always random. It's so random, right? I don't know if the company, one of the companies who sets passwords, I think it's Cloudflare, who sets all the security for the most of the internet. The way they do it in their lobby in San Francisco, cute little boutique place, is they have a big wall of lava lamps that are always going. Whenever they need to set cryptic codes, they have a camera that takes a picture of the lava lamps and generates a code based on that chaos. So chaos is important. And I think that's what we're talking about here. You know how a lot of people can't sleep without noise or they got white noise machines? I think moss and trees and nature like that, I think is the visual equivalent of that chaos that our mind says, nope, fuck it, not dealing with that. Let me go, you know, focus on something important. So I think having natural chaos, chaos might be too rough of a word, but it's that randomness. The brain just realizes that's too much. Kind of like if you go to a symphony, or the earlier guest was listening to some jazz. If you listen to cool jazz or acid jazz, it's so complex, your brain checks out. You're like, okay, whatever. And I think that happens when we're around nature in a visual way. The brain just says, okay, whatever, nice. Okay, I'm just going to do a thing.
You're so right, John. You're absolutely right.
I got it.
And you mentioned gardening earlier, and your preferred aesthetic for gardening. I don't know if you've heard the term chaos gardening.
No.
But in the past, 12 to 18 months, that term chaos gardening has become, part of the zeitgeist, so to speak, as people adopt more. So my husband's European, so he's always gardened in a European kind of way. And my house it was built in 1909. I'm in an older neighborhood, and so the trees are big.
Nice.
The grass is not uniform. In fact, and he's busy encroaching on every last bit of grass so that we don't have to water it and deal with it, replacing it with, native vines and other things. But chaos gardening is that notion of it's not going to look like Disneyland, right? It's not going to be that manicured thing, but there's going to be an awful lot going on. And chaos gardening, we find native plants start to thrive, and then companion plants. Because when we kind of let things, it's surprising. Some of the natural plants actually are a support mechanism and are a nice companion plant to, say, I've got canna. If you know those beautiful bright flowers, they grow really tall, called canna. Like I know that the canna loves the wild jasmine vine that grows naturally. So those companion plants that work. So chaos is, and our brains like that. I think our brains are also very attuned to the color green. And that's a whole subject unto itself about how we process green.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, as an etymologist within the animal kingdom, that ability to see green actually creates a lot of differentiation between the species. Those of us that can see green and those who can't. So green does something really important to our brains within about 30 to 40 seconds of looking at greenery, whether it's the trees in your backyard or the moss I've got on my wall. Within 30 to 40 seconds, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate drops, and your cortisol levels start to drop.
It's so important.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just within seconds. So when you look, when I'm at home and I look up and beyond my computer screen to moss, which is of course everywhere in this house, um, I really do. I've got to remember that I need more than 10 seconds. Give it, 30 to 40 seconds. That feeling it's almost
Yeah,
instantaneous.
yeah. The where do you get the moss? Like, do you grow it yourselves? Does it come from a moss farm? What's going on?
Oh, would that we could. And yeah, I wish that moss could grow in our area because we sure would.
Yeah.
We actually made the decision a few years ago to source our moss entirely within the United States. There are moss providers. There's many
No
companies that
kidding.
import moss from Scandinavia. So that's why it's called reindeer
Okay.
moss. Because actually,
Yeah.
it's technically a lichen, and reindeers eat it. So in
Yeah.
Norway, let's talk about where the reindeer actually are, because yes, they do exist. They're real things, and they're in Norway, and they live on reindeer moss. And Russia exports, mosses. China exports. We made the decision to source entirely within the United States because we wanted to walk the talk.
Sure.
We tout ourselves as a sustainable company. Moss is a sustainable product, meaning it doesn't need to be watered or misted. And overseas shipping just was more of a carbon footprint than we wanted to leave.
Yeah.
So our moss is harvested in North Carolina and Kentucky.
Neat.
It's harvested with great care to not harm the plants around it. The our trusted and wonderful vendor ensures that he leaves an area 2 years for regrowth before
Yeah.
reharvesting, because of course you want
Makes
that
sense.
moss to grow back.
Yeah.
Yep,
Otherwise, you won't have any next
and
time.
exactly. But it really is a plenty
Hey,
in North Carolina and Kentucky and parts of Florida.
do they treat it with the zombification? Sorry, I know you don't like that.
That's okay.
It's fun because we are talking about a zombie podcast event in October, so zombies are kind of on our mind anyway.
Fun.
But so, did they apply the treatment to their preservation immediately? Like kind of like when you flash freeze vegetables to keep their freshness, do you immediately treat? Not you, but did they do that in the field?
Right.
Okay.
No, actually, they bring it back.
Mhm.
They bring it back, and really, you're not under a time constraint at that moment. If there have been recent rains, one of the first things they'll do is let it dry out, and we watch very carefully because as I mentioned, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Florida, when hurricane season comes.
Right.
Which it does every year without fail. There might be some times where it's either difficult to get out and harvest or things need to dry out, but they're not under a time constraint. They're not under a ton of pressure to do that. It's about what needs. I know that he's going through his orders, probably us at the top, because I think we're probably ordering more than anybody else, and then goes down the line, who needs what color. I will say this for him: he is, in our estimation, the best there is. I admittedly, for proprietary reasons, I don't share that information about who he is, but he knows who he is, and he is just so talented at ensuring that the moss is color fast. We have not seen, because we've tested others, and we've not seen any other product that is as color fast and holds its color quite as long as the moss that we're using.
Is this
So
How long is the life of moss?
great question, Rena. I don't know yet.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I don't know
Longer
yet.
than your business.
Exactly. I've
Wow.
got 8 years and counting.
Wow.
And that's why these frames in my house are my touchstone and my experiment for, if this ever turns brown, I'll let you know. But so far, there does not seem, I mean, this hasn't even faded by a few shades.
That's so
So
cool.
I can't imagine what would possibly cause it to fade. I mean, there's going to be at least another, 10, 15, 20 years. And
Does
the other thing
sun
is,
does sun
um,
fade it?
yeah, well, yes. Not unlike if you've got a rug that gets a lot of
Sure.
western, especially southwestern sun, you can see almost see where the sun cuts it if it, and same thing will happen. We had a client who had a beautiful installation, but there was a skylight in her
Mm.
office. And what it did, and I could see it. I could see where just there was a kind of a line
Yeah,
going through the center of the piece. When I asked her, well, oh, do you want me to spruce that? She said no. She loved it. She said that
it is pretty cool.
reminds me. Yeah.
It's unique.
She's like, it reminds me of the skylight. It reminds me of the patterns of the
Yeah.
sun. She's like, to me, it's a testament of the cycles. And so
Wow. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
maybe I should intentionally make some sun go through in shapes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. There's a lot of artists and architects who have included decay in part of their work. Like I remember
Wow,
Frank Lloyd Wright.
decay could be beautiful.
Yeah, especially with like
Yeah.
a patina on metal and rust and things like that. And definitely I could see it with plants, especially if you could determine how bright the sun is by how much your plant is lit up that day. Because as it comes across the skylight each day, yeah, it's either cloudy or whatever. So I could see that's really adds a dynamic effect to the office. Can we talk about things like fulfillment, like cost and shipping? Can you ship something like that, first of all? Because I'm wondering, no matter how well you pack it, you might rub some of the preservation coating off, right?
Actually, we're so fortunate. Our workshop is located inside Picture and Frame Industries, which is a company that's been around for 60 years, and they're a frame maker, and
Okay.
they do some signage,
Yeah.
but they're primarily, picture and frame industry. So they're frame making. He has such extensive experience in shipping and creating. The man has an engineer's mind, and we've shipped all over the country. We've shipped to
Oh,
Canada.
nice.
And it goes into whether it's a frame piece or some folks just want a panel that they'll be putting into a recessed area. We can, if as long as it's larger than 2 feet, so we really can't get any smaller than 2 feet, but any panel is possible. Anywhere from 2 feet all the way up to 8 feet for a single panel.
Mhm.
And then if you need bigger than that, then you'll start connecting panels. But we have never had a problem with a shipment arriving in anything but perfect condition. We pack them very carefully,
Yep.
obviously, and they're crated, but we ship nationwide. So
So, are you comfortable talking about price ranges, like cost ranges?
absolutely,
Okay, let's talk about that.
absolutely. We are currently at about $115 a square foot, and that includes the frame.
Okay.
And we include the frame for a number of reasons. Firstly, there are moss providers who don't incorporate frames. And it's a taste thing. I think it's an aesthetic
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
For us, we do it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it protects the moss. And people from bumping into it or from having just tiny, tiny little pieces hit the floor. The other reason is that we feel that it ensures that the piece looks finished, and just as you would frame a canvas that an artist painted.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
There's the difference of, and we all know. I mean, I've got an unframed canvas on my wall over here. It's a beautiful piece I got from Mexico that we just, but it's unframed. It's kind of, raw like that. And because this is folk art, it works. But for us, we want that framed, that finished look. And when we ship out unframed panels, we strongly, strongly recommend that our clients install it in a minimum of about 2.5 to 3 inch recess, because that recess kind of acts as a de facto frame.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It protects it a lot too.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yep,
from people
you
from
get it.
rubbing up against it or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of the things that I was talking to someone yesterday, and she said the most wonderful thing in this. I'm going to keep using this. She said her husband said that she has a lot of business heart, but not a lot of business smart. And now he was complimenting her in her approach to things, and what he was addressing is that she's coming at her business, which happens to be a school, which is wonderful, with so much heart that she's not focused on revenue. She's not focused on making money hand over fist.
Oh yeah.
And I would say we're similar in that we really haven't increased our prices in a number of years. We know that we're coming in a little bit lower than the average, and that's fine with us. We want to, and even still, there are times that folks, when they don't know anything about it, there's a little bit of sticker shock, but that $115 a square foot is still going to be less expensive than a lot of other finishing materials, including acoustic solutions. And we want to make sure that, we want to green the world. We want to make we want to make the world a greener place. And so making sure that we don't, that the price is affordable for most people is something that's really important to us.
Yeah, well, and that you can stay in business and perpetuate the dream here. So I don't think that's unreasonable because it's partially art. Like you said, it lasts forever. And when you're talking about a couple grand for a 4x8 piece, it's not that much to me. I mean, there's a lot of high-end art collectors who spend you know how much they spend, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for art. And also in the signage industry, if you put an illuminated, lobby sign or something like that, you're up to a few grand already. So make it a statement, whether it's with a sign or a mural or even a green wall. Yeah, it seems in range, and it doesn't seem too expensive or cheap. It seems right to me.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. No, and the frames we're using, they're all handmade.
Yeah.
Every frame is handmade and sturdy as all get out. It comes with a French cleat for ease of installation. So, you just put part of the cleat on the wall and then hook. And so thank you. That's nice to hear.
Who do you think you compete against? Because I'm thinking it's not necessarily signs. Sometimes you need a sign because it has to say a specific thing. But do you compete against the people who come and service a lobby for flowers, fresh flowers? Do you compete against fish tank people, or do you compete against other people like that who are charging tens of thousands of dollars for different types of placemaking items?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that would even include, I would say, muralists.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, because anybody that's building an intentional space, once you have the identifier and the traffic patterns, you got the direction, you go here, open that door, here's where you are. Everything else really doesn't have to be a sign at all. It could be made by sign makers, but it could also be like wood cabinet makers making frames, people assembling, growing plant matter and things like that, which still boggles my mind that plant could be reanimated. Anyway, I'm going to look in. I got to look into moss after we get done here.
Have you noticed, John, the proliferation of slat walls? Those wood slat wall installations. I would say right now, if we get bumped from a project, it would be because they're replacing it with those wood slat walls. And I haven't. I'm really not even all that familiar with what those are priced at, about the pricing of those, but that's currently in terms of what designers are doing. We see a lot of those slat walls.
They're pricey, but they're also available used on Marketplace. And sometimes when businesses move out, they leave the slat walls there. So, I mean, the fact that a slat wall is almost indestructible, they're going to last forever, and they rotate to the secondhand market. So I think, yeah. And the person that needs a slat wall or wants a slat wall is very, in my mind, commercially driven. They just want to display product. They're not trying to build a vibe. They're not trying to make you feel comfortable. They just want, here's all the stuff you could buy from us displayed all out and open, which as a consumer is cool. Like if you have a card shop or, Lachotchki's or whatever. But I can see that. But just that kind of comes back to the old thing where people are just cheap. Yeah, people are just cheap and they just want to make money as soon and quickly as possible. Like they don't care about the vibe. Like get all the product up. You know what I mean? It takes a really kind of a mature mindset, whether you've been in business for 10 years and you realize we need a vibe, or a mature mindset where you haven't started a business at all and realized we need a vibe. So it takes a mature mindset to realize that we're building more than just the act of commerce. If you want a building that stands out, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.